Arizona, Alabama features the best point guards in the country squaring off. Jaden Bradley versus LaBaron Philon. It'll be a movie on Saturday night.
You are Locked On Wildcats, your daily podcast on the Arizona Wildcats. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome into Locked On Wildcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the number one sports podcast network around. I'm your host, Leif Thulin, your resident college basketball guru, stats nerd, point guard by game, and ball knower by trade. And I'm excited to talk Arizona hoops and a little bit of football with you today. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. If you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. And today on the show, I'm going to break down just how good these two guards, Jaden Bradley and LaBaron Philon, have been, discuss their matchup individually, discuss who has the edge between them, between the two teams, and why their game styles are so different but so important to this game script of how Arizona, Alabama will go on Saturday. And then lastly, we'll touch on what SMU brings to the table out of the ACC in the Holiday Bowl. Let's dive right in. Jaden Bradley has played at an all-conference level, probably an all-American level if the season ended today, and we know he's delivered in big games. Like, big games equal Jaden Bradley games. And when he's been needed, which are the moments that stand out, right? You watch the Florida game, he had a 10-point spurt all on his own. Against UCLA, he took over late. You watch him beat guys that are supposedly bigger names. The whole story was Jaden Bradley didn't make the Cousy Award. But what's important is not that narrative. It's that at the end of the game, the point guard on the best team in the nation has played like an All-American, not shied for the moment, but excelled. Accepted, welcomed, and excelled in those moments. And the narrative of All-American is a team-driven one to a degree. You need to be on a really good team if you're not putting up over 20 points. Jaden Bradley's putting up very good numbers, no doubt about it. All conference numbers. I don't know about All-American, but he's an All-American if Arizona's as good as they are. And Arizona's as good as they are because Jaden Bradley's as good as he is. And they need Jaden Bradley to do that against Alabama. Not to mention, there's unsubstantiated things that you can't see in a box score, right? You can see how good he is on defense with your eyes, but you're not going to see that in a normal box score. You can find some metrics that support it. You're also not going to value leadership in a box score. He's an All-American right now. He's an elite defender, an elite closer, knows when to pick and choose his spots, and has played his best basketball against the best team so far on an 8-0 team that is number one in the nation. On the other side, there's a fellow by the name of LaBaron Philon, who I believe will be a lottery pick. That's top 14 of the NBA draft. Last year, he was the last player to take his name out of the NBA draft, would have been a first-rounder, and he's gotten way, way better. Last year, Mark Sears was the point guard for Alabama, and he was an All-American, and LaBaron Philon's way better. Like, way better. And Mark Sears, that's not a slight at you. Mark Sears was great for Alabama. He was the bellwether for that team. But when LaBaron Philon is on, he can do things Mark Sears could not do. And this is the marquee matchup. And there's no world where that's not going to take the front line, because in other matchups where Bradley has won, he's played against All-Americans. This is the marquee matchup. And though the numerical output would favor LaBaron Philon, Bradley has been the Grim Reaper for all these guards that had all-conference or all-American honors with their names, beginning with Xavier Lee and Boogie Flan. Flan was for all-SEC preseason, and he had all-conference honors and all defensive honors, and Bradley dusted them. 27 points and 10 in a row at the end of the game. Next comes second-team All-American, the sixth most voted for All-American, meaning he's the one off of first-team All-American, Donovan Dent of UCLA. And Bradley takes over late and wins the game for Arizona in Inglewood. And he locked up Donovan Dent in the process. Dent did not have a good game whatsoever, was a non-impact. And then comes Silas Demery and UConn. And Bradley, again, wins the game late with his heroics, scored 21 in stores, was the better guard. He had a very effective game in routing Auburn against Pettiford. Pettiford erupted, had 30 points, but I would argue some of those points were once Arizona had won this game, and Bradley could have scored more had they needed it, but he paced his team to a 30-point victory. I think LaBaron Philon is better than all those guys I just mentioned, and this is Jaden Bradley's biggest test yet. And that is the question. Bradley will score fine against Alabama, and he's going to get out and run because that's the way Alabama plays. He's going to get out and run. That's where Jaden Bradley is best. And I buried the lead. I mean, he went to Alabama for his first year before coming here for 3 years to Tucson. And I think what matters for Bradley is staying close and limiting Philon more than scoring a ton. His late game heroics, of course, will matter if that comes into the question. But the big question is, can Bradley slow down Philon? Philon scores 21.4 points per game, 5 assists, 3 boards, 57% from the field, 40 from 3. And in the big games, he's been great. He's delivered and then some. 29 against Clemson, 29 against Gonzaga, took over against Illinois. North of 20 in 4 of his last 5 games. Philon's lightning fast, an excellent ambidextrous finisher, and is long enough at 6'4" to challenge the trades that Arizona employs. This is a matchup I doubt there will be switches against because he's just so fast. Even though Alabama shoots a ton of threes, and usually switching is a good way to mitigate that three-point shooting option, I just think that it's going to be Jaden Bradley's job to guard him. And I expect them to go mano-a-mano all night long. I think that Philon is going to be the points in the paint offense all by himself for Alabama, and Jaden Bradley is going to get plenty of points in his paint by himself. But if Alabama can be kept out of the paint by Bradley's defense on Philon, then Alabama is going to have to shoot a ton of threes. I expect this not to be mano-a-mano in terms of a one-on-one who's better, because I think numbers would favor Philon. Bradley's revenge game against Alabama is a big narrative, like I said. But I'm most excited to see these two duel, and I predict a big stop at the end of the game from Bradley on Philon to be the difference if this game's close, because I trust Jaden Bradley at the end of the game more than anyone in the country right now. And I think it's really interesting to note how reliant Alabama is on LeBaron Philon, because in big games, LeBaron Philon has delivered. But in games they've lost, he's been less efficient. He still put up numbers, but if the efficiency can be diminished, then you can find a way to beat this team. This is a vulnerable team because in close games that athletically can mirror Alabama, Alabama's been susceptible. Alabama has not found a way to win all of their close games. They found a way to overpower teams that are a little less experienced in big games. Alabama, for one thing, will not be intimidated by Arizona. They've already played an elite schedule. I mentioned they've played Clemson, they've played Gonzaga, they've played Illinois, they've played all these teams, Purdue. And the biggest thing they have is if they can stay in the game rebounding-wise. We'll touch on that. But the storyline in terms of personnel is going to be the size in the interior and the backcourt battle. We'll touch on next how this game script favors Alabama or Arizona, depending on how these two star guards perform. We'll discuss that and which team has the edge if these two play close together and which one has to play better to achieve their team gaining an advantage, what the game script looks like, and much, much more coming up next on Locked On Wildcats. NFL Sundays move fast, one big play, and suddenly everything feels different. That's what makes live betting with FanDuel so exciting. You're not just watching the game, you're reacting to it in real time. With FanDuel, you can place bets as the action unfolds. With every drive, every momentum swing, every highlight moment, you can be living that with your team and with your fantasy players, whoever you may enjoy watching. Live betting is best when the game starts to shift, a receiver gets hot, a defense tightens up, or the momentum flips after a turnover. FanDuel lets you jump into the moment, and you can play live spreads, money lines that adjust instantly, and player props update as the guys heat up as well. So if you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your live NFL bets all season long on FanDuel. The game moves fast, and so can you. Thank you for making Locked On Wildcats your first listen of the day, and thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. If you're a true diehard Wildcats fan, the Everydayer All Access tier is built for you. You'll get one-on-one text access with me, all access episodes, an exclusive newsletter, and 15% discount with the Locked On merch store. So head to https://LockedOnWildcats.supercast.com to join the Everydayer Club and unlock all access. You can also find the link in the show notes that'll be posted below on both YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. So please join me there. I'm excited to launch that and talk to you about your beloved Arizona Wildcats. And speaking of, welcome back to Locked On Wildcats. If Jaden Bradley and LaBaron Philon post similar stat lines, that means one of two things, in my opinion. That if they're up to Philon's pure numbers, meaning 20, 21 a game or more, I think Bradley is either the only player scoring for Arizona, and it bodes poorly for Arizona, or more likely Arizona is beating Bama in a high-scoring game where the pace accelerates and dictates that Jaden Bradley must score for Arizona, but the high pace is aiding Jaden Bradley in what he does very well, which is getting into the rim in the open court. Bradley can get there in a half-court setting. But in a game that should be a run-and-gun game, I expect Bradley to have a couple run-out layups or a couple semi-transition ones where he puts the impetus on the defense to try to stop him, and no one can stop Bradley in the open court. That's been the case for all of his college career. And now if Philon drops to Bradley's averages, I feel very confident in Arizona's chances, meaning Alabama would have to rely so heavily on I won't call them ancillary pieces, but guys that are not the stars. And they'll have to rely so heavily on the three from those guys as Philon's a downhill driver. And if he's taken away from the paint, meaning that he's not scoring or assisting from his drives, that means Aiden Holloway and company have to complete a very difficult sequence of the way they want to play, which is break down very good defenders with size and knock down enough threes with their own individual creation. And they have to vastly exceed their averages, both from a shooting percentage standpoint and points per game standpoint. So those are two ways I see this game going. So let's talk game script as a whole outside of these two guards. But those two guards control the tempo. I think this game is going to be very fast, like very, very, very fast. And Arizona will not be uncomfortable in it. And they won't be uncomfortable getting a track meet, just as they were not against Florida or against Auburn. And I know Auburn didn't score very well, but that was meant to be a speed game. Like, they wanted to speed Arizona up. The only scare would be the big bodies of Arizona that they employ. How long can you play as fast as Alabama wants to play that fast? Because Arizona can play fast. They're 33rd in tempo, and that's very quick. Alabama's higher, but it's how long can you play that quickly as opposed to just opportunistically running out. My other concern would be turnovers, as Arizona looks susceptible against Auburn only when they turned it over, because defensively they were fantastic, stifling what was the 12th ranked offense. Alabama's even better offensively, but they do not force turnovers at all. They're 325th in forced turnovers, and their non-steal, like non-live ball turnovers percentage is 365th. Arizona's bigs don't really sacrifice speed to employ their size, and so I kind of think that Arizona will be able to stifle Alabama in the half court, whereas a lot of teams are too spread out, and at the speed of the game, one, they go smaller, and they don't have guys that can slide with Alabama. Arizona can probably play the same lineups they want to play and not really change too much. They may change how they guard actions, how they defend ball screens, how many players they crash to the offensive glass. But I think that they have the rare bodies that can really defend in space, protect the rim, and not sacrifice their size with speed. Like, they don't need to sacrifice being fleet of foot to employ their size, because Toby Awaka moves well. Koa Pete moves fantastically. Ivan Karchenkov can guard 1 through 4. And like I said, Koa Pete and Ivan in particular are unicorns in the way that they can move defensively to stymie quick players and use then their brawn on the other end to bogard those guys out of the way and score near the rim. How they can box out and create second chances and also be heady players, and they don't sacrifice size, speed, strength, intelligence. Those guys are just so versatile. So I expect that Arizona is ready for Alabama to play very quickly. They're ready for them to launch a ton of threes. I don't expect Arizona to change and shoot a ton of threes, but I do think they'll shoot probably a little more than they have. And that's the way I see it going. I expect a very quickly paced game, and one where whoever can do better at what the other team does extremely well wins. And what I mean by that is if Arizona hits any decent number of threes, I see them winning because they will score inside. That is a given. And Alabama can win if they generate points in the paint to complement their tons of threes. They need to shoot well to do so. They need to shoot well and generate points in the paint, and points generated by drives. Whether it's, what I mean by that is, can they put enough pressure on the rim to get the defense to suck it and then kick out and shoot threes rather than shooting contested threes, because they're going to make a few of those too. Alabama would have to shoot so tremendously well if they don't do that, and they just have to hit only threes to beat Arizona's repeatability of scoring twos, that I think they need to hit a fair amount of paint-oriented points, free throws, and layups to complement their three-point shooting, which I think they'll also need to shoot well. So Arizona has to hit a couple threes to complement their points in the paint, and Bama needs to score some points in the paint to complement their ton of threes. And here are some stats that illustrate how wildly differing these two style of plays are. They are both top 12 in the country by ranking, meaning that they're eligible to be national champions. And here's how diametrically opposed these teams are. Arizona scores 60% of their points from 2 and are 355th in percentage of points from 3 and are 363rd in 3-pointers attempted per field goal attempt. So basically, they are dead last in the nation in terms of their 3-point volume. Alabama, on the other hand, scores 40% of their points from 3, shoots 53% of their attempts from 3, which is 7th in the nation, and they're 36th in percentage of points scored from 3. I mean, they are very, very reliant on 3. And the one driver they have is LaBaron Philon. Alabama also does not force turnovers at all, so I think that bodes very well for Arizona. But those are some super extremes in the sport sparring, and usually that means there's going to be some volatility in the result because it's harder to project when teams are so different. So Arizona, the other thing I'd mention is they're far broader than Alabama, meaning that their strength, their brawn is going to pay dividends because Alabama's got some lengthy players, but they have competed hard on the glass against a couple teams that they've played, and they've won those games, and they've been decimated by others. Purdue grabbed double as many rebounds as Bama in Tuscaloosa, 48-23, and then Alabama out-rebounded St. John's, and St. John's has a lot of bigs, and they're known for their tenacity. They lost the boards by 8 against Gonzaga. They lost a close one there. Out-rebounded Illinois by 2. In their big games, they've needed to win the glass to win, and Arizona has yet to fall on the glass. And Arizona's the 8th biggest team in the country and are wide and strong, not just tall. Alabama employs a lot of stretch fours, but I think that the bigger question will be, can Alabama play as fast as they want without sacrificing on the glass by playing stretch 4s and 5s, or will Arizona have to scale down and play smaller to match the pace set by Alabama guards? Essentially, can Alabama hit enough threes from the front court to compensate for the lack of rebounding, and can Arizona grab enough rebounds to make Alabama change how they want to play? My guess is Arizona wins that battle in the front court due to how rare Koa Pete is as an athlete, a mover, while still being able to run. Like, he gives them leeway in both. The other big questions we'll talk about tomorrow with a fun guest I'm bringing in to analyze this game in greater detail. But coming up next, I'll discuss the biggest storylines of the Holiday Bowl between Arizona and SMU after a word from Rougiet. Let's talk about something most men don't want to bring up, but absolutely should. Stress from work, money, life. It doesn't just switch off at night. And when it shows up at the worst possible time, Rougiet Ready is designed to help you take back control. Rougiet Ready is a next generation prescription treatment created to support both the brain and the body so you can feel present, confident, and ready when the moment matters. Rougiet Ready combines 3 clinically proven ingredients in 1 mint that dissolves under your tongue so it absorbs quickly. And you can connect with a board-certified doctor online, and everything ships discreetly to your door. It's easy to understand why over 150,000 men have already made the switch. If you've been thinking about taking the next step, now's the time. Head to Rougiet.com/LockedOnCollege. That's RUGIET.com/LockedOnCollege to get 15% off your order for a limited time. Rougiet Ready. Feel present, feel confident, and feel ready. Welcome back to Locked On Wildcats. Leif Thulin with you here. Apologies for the sniffles, battling a cold right now. Arizona basketball being ranked number 1 has drawn the attention, and rightly so, but under the radar is Arizona football, a team that's up to number 17 in the rankings and has 5 straight wins in the Big 12 to finish the season after starting with a tumultuous 4-3 that very easily could have been a better start to the season if they had held on against BYU. And overtime could have gotten some stops against Houston. Like, what differences could there be? No, there's no reason to go through all that now. But let me put this in perspective. It's one of the hottest teams in the football, not just the Big 12. 5 straight wins to finish Big 12 play. A very impressive recruiting class coming in. Arizona State, comparatively, is in turmoil, losing their quarterback. Arizona beat them in the big game. And you're also seeing the recruiting class shift towards Arizona. Like, Arizona seems likely to assert themselves as a team to set to compete for years in the Big 12 in football, not just in basketball, in football too. And all is wonderful, but let's meet the team that stands in the way of Brent Brennan and Noah Fafita and company from achieving a 10-win season after the alarm bells were set off by myself and many others about Brent Brennan and can he be the coach of the Wildcats. It could be a 10-win season if they could beat the SMU Mustangs. Here's what SMU brings to the table. And Arizona is seeking its 5th 10-win season in school history. So this is not like something that has happened a ton. Like, this does matter. And as for SMU, They score the ball well. They kind of remind me in terms of a statistical profile of Arizona. They score the ball well. They're led by a dynamic quarterback who takes care of the ball and can really sling the ball. And they also force turnovers well, much like Arizona. Like their profiles are similar. Very good quarterback, offensively oriented team. But then if you look at the numbers, the defense plays a large part because they have a very good turnover ratio, right? They force turnovers and they don't commit them. This game features compelling matchups between two very productive quarterbacks. We know all about Fafita, who I've deemed the quarterback of the year in the Big 12 and also was named the best quarterback in the Big 12 on First Team All Conference. Fafita, of course, you guys know, nearly 3,000 yards, 26 touchdowns. Kevin Jennings for SMU, 3,363 yards, 26 touchdowns. Like very similar profiles there. And that deserves to be a storyline. And it should be. But I'm eager to see how the defenses fare against these potent offenses, right? Arizona ranks third in the FBS with a plus 16 turnover margin. And SMU is not a shabby plus 11 in that department. So these defenses give the ball to those very good quarterbacks, and that's their recipe to win. Of course, the running games need to complement, and there's other parts of this. But this game pits SMU's high-powered passing offense, ranked 12th in the FBS, 284 passing yards per game, against an elite Arizona passing defense, especially man-to-man defense, ranked 5th nationally and only allowing 156 passing yards allowed per game. The outcome really may hinge on which unit prevails there. But on the other end, SMU's red zone defense is top 5 nationally, which is a huge test for Arizona's offense, which isn't particularly adept in the red zone. They've scored, but they haven't scored at the most elite level. And that's super interesting. Like there are layers to this that are deeper than just, good quarterback, decent defense. Takeaways are pretty key, and these teams have similar records. Like I think this is an interesting matchup. It may not be the name brand. SMU, they competed with Clemson last year very, very well in the ACC. And much like any game, it would be interesting to see which unit steps up against the other potent one better. Like that's, we just talked about in basketball in terms of, can Alabama make Arizona get smaller to keep up with them? Like that's a talk for any sporting event. Which team can mitigate the other team's strengths and make the other team change their game plan? But I'm very curious to see which units as a team can step up against the best units of the other team. Like, can SMU's defense in the red zone stifle Arizona more than Arizona's very good passing defense stop the really impressive 12th ranked FBS 284 yards of passing per game from Kevin Jennings and company? And SMU is a bit of a Jekyll and Hyde. And what I mean by that is they've featured some impressive highs, such as beating Miami, beating Clemson. Miami's in the playoff. Clemson's the brand name in the ACC. But they've also had some strange lows. And they finished on a loss, finishing 8-4. And they lost to Cal, which Stanford beat. Like, there are some serious changes here. And they may not have the sexy name that Miami or Clemson have, but they do present an interesting matchup for Arizona. They present an interesting matchup stylistically because they are mirroring what Arizona does well. And typically Arizona has had their run game step up against teams that, take away the throw, or they have had their defense step up and force turnovers against teams that really run well but are one-dimensional. This team's not very one-dimensional. There's a lot that you want to unpack, and we'll unpack a ton of it in coming up episodes on Locked On Wildcats. So if you want to talk about this, send me some questions. This game's on January 2nd, so we'll discuss this game further in the coming weeks leading up to January 2nd with Gus Johnson, Joel Klatt on the call on Fox. But please send me your questions about this matchup. Send me your predictions. And thank you guys for tuning in to Locked On Wildcats. Yeah, thank you guys for tuning in to Locked On Wildcats. Tomorrow we're going to talk about the big top 12 clash between Arizona and Alabama and begin to preview the holiday more, like I said. But tomorrow I've got a guest coming on. You may know him a little bit, and he's got an interesting tie to the Wildcats. So make sure you subscribe and follow Locked On Wildcats so you get all the latest episodes with me. And if you want to connect with me personally, I'm easy. My Twitter is just my name, Leif Thulin, with the L and the T respectively capitalized. And by the way, did Locked On Wildcats make your Spotify Wrapped? Prove it on social media to secure a free month of our brand new Everydayer Club. Just tag our national Locked On Podcast Network account on any social platform, and we'll drop a code and be one of the first to join the Everydayer Club to get your favorite show ad-free and exclusive access to the Everydayers and the members-only Discord channel. For those of you on the video, we send you to the first 24/7 National Locked On Podcast Network YouTube channel. And on audio, make sure you check out Locked On College Football and make that your second listen of the day. And thank you for making Locked On Wildcats your first listen. Sign off, Leif Thulin. Excited to be back with you tomorrow with a guest breaking down Arizona, Alabama in the top 12 clash taking place in Birmingham on Saturday.